Okay, so I just want to start by thanking the organizers. It's wonderful to be here. Law and informatics is usually not a topic that we law professors get into. And so I hope that with this establishment of the Institute, NKU can become the breeding ground for a law in informatics movement so that we can actually do more work that's interesting in the area, but that's also outside our traditional discipline. So what I'm going to do is to go join the others in talking about something that has been established with standards, but go from bioinformatics to and also military technologies to further away to something that is so involved with our daily life, and that is consumer electronics. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the power dynamics behind the establishment of the region codes, as well as the aftermath of this type of standards, how it's going to affect our daily life, and what are we going to do about it. So if you look at the establishment of the regional codes, you can find that there are different regions with respect to how we can use the DVD. And so here in the US is region 1, and in Europe and Japan is region 2. And then if you go to look at across the world, you can see all the different regions. And the three typical justifications for why we need to have region codes is price discrimination, market segmentation, and licensing arrangement. So price discrimination refers to the fact that different countries have different costs of living, and so we try to group the countries together so that we can make sure that the products will be affordable in those places. And market segmentation actually is tied to the industry structure of how we actually disseminate, whether it's computer software or whether it's movies. And so a good example would be we start with Hollywood, and that's region 1, and then we go to other places, that's region 2, region 3, and that is much easier for us to figure out what type of distribution strategy we want to have, or where when we are trying to send our actors, directors to go out there to do press conferences, we can always figure out how to deal with that. And there are also other examples about the fact that if we have Christmas right here, but other countries will not have major celebration until, for example, Chinese New Year, then we can separate the different release dates as well as distribution of products that work well based on our strategy of segmenting the different markets. And finally, with respect to licensing arrangement, there are different companies, there are different subsidiaries, there are different national regulations about what type of things can be distributed, what type of things can be displayed in all those movies as well as the content within the DVDs. And so it's quite important for us to figure out a way to have separate arrangement with respect to different products. But what we got right here is basically artificial geography. Okay, so if you look at the different region codes, it's quite troubling in terms of what's going on there. These are the different regions we got here. So Hong Kong is part of China, but China is region 6, and Hong Kong is region 3. And so if you are in Hong Kong, you basically have to figure out whether the DVD is coming from mainland, because that is region 6, or whether you got it locally. Australia, Brazil, and Argentina are all in region 4, and so that's the green color you get. Australia speaks English, Brazil, Portuguese, Argentina, Spanish. And if you're thinking about the cost of living in Australia and compare it with the cost of living in Argentina and Brazil, it's actually quite shocking how you can group this together in terms of price discrimination. And then we also, for those of you, especially from the first panel, we have some speakers from Russia, that is region 5, and so is India. So this is actually quite logical when you think about those middle-income countries, the so-called BRICS countries. That includes Brazil, Russia, India, and China, except that Brazil is number 4 and China is number 6. But Russia and India is number 5, so together right there. But that also covers the African continent, right? So if you're thinking about the middle-income countries, then all those countries in sub-Saharan Africa is also region 5. So that's actually quite troubling in terms of how we group all those countries together. And one way I look at this one is to consider region 5 as those regions that Hollywood doesn't care. And so they just group all of them together because that's not the dominant location for them to market the product. So what I want to focus on is the tension between copyright and also other issues, and that is convenience, competition, civil rights, and censorship. And so if you remember the first panel, we talked about how copyright is involved with respect to cybercrime. But when you think about a lot of those laws that have been established within a copyright system, there are actually a lot of limitations, exceptions. It's not as black and white as we expect in terms of whether this is legal or whether this is illegal. And on top of that, we also have other issues that we need to think about. So I'll start with the 4 different issues I want to talk about. So convenience. So I teach here in the US as well as teaching in Hong Kong and in China. So I spent about 8 months here, and then the rest of the time I spent in Asia and other places. The difficulty for me is that whenever I go into a place like this one, HMV, and trying to figure out what DVD I want to buy, I have to decide at that point whether I'm going to watch that DVD at home in Hong Kong or whether I'm going to take it back into the US to watch it there because Hong Kong is region 3 and the US is region 1. And so if you're thinking about consumers who are trying to figure out what would be a good way for them to make purchases, this is not necessarily the most conducive to purchase in light of the fact that consumers are a little bit unsure as to where they're going to use the product, or they also may be confused by the labeling. They might be hurrying to buy a product at the airport, and then when they go back home, they find out that they cannot play it. One of the very interesting example that's been used by others is when President Obama gives Gordon Brown, I think 25 DVDs during the visit, and to show that this is the major American movies that come from the United States. The problem, though, is that it's unclear whether the DVDs is actually region 3, there's no region, or region 1. Because if it's region 1, that means Gordon Brown will not be able to watch all those DVDs despite the fact that it's a gift from the US when he goes back to the UK, because that's region 2. And so if you go on to the internet, you find a lot of the discussion about how silly this gift is when those people might not actually be able to watch the DVDs that's been given to them. And that's also true for a lot of those students who are actually studying in the US. When they want to watch a lot of the local media, local content, local media, they have a tough time. I still remember when I was studying here in the US for undergraduate, we always get together to watch a lot of those movies from home. And some of the movies are right here, and they are in Chinese, and a lot of them are not easy to get in the United States. There's not a dubbed version or English version. So a lot of times we actually have to buy it in Hong Kong, or we need to import it all the way from there in order for us to watch that. The difficulty, though, is that if we only have the player that we purchase here, we may not be able to watch those DVDs because it's region 3, and a lot of the players that we have here is region 1. So one way to do it is to buy the region 3 DVD players, but for a lot of people, they might not know where to get it, or they might not be willing to pay the extra money to import a region 3 player, and they find that is a little bit problematic. So once in a while, you get the version that's been dubbed in English, but for those of us who actually can understand the original language, we actually find it quite troubling because the dubbed version is just doesn't offer the same type of entertainment. And also, sometimes you might also have things being changed that is more catered to the local audience, and that's not that satisfactory either. This is a good example of what has been done by Hollywood, and this is the original version. And when they put out the version in English, they were deciding whether they should follow the original version in Cantonese or whether they should take advantage of the larger customer base in Chinese that is Mandarin. And so eventually they've picked Cantonese because that's the original version. But think about all those Chinese customers who really want to watch something like this one. They will not be able to understand the language because for the local product, it includes both Cantonese and Mandarin. But for the English version that we can get from Amazon or from Barnes & Nobles, it only includes English and Cantonese. So that's a good example of how a lot of those movie producers and also distribution companies are trying to figure out how to target a product, but may not necessarily be in the interest of consumers. This is the region-free players that I talk about, and so you can actually get it. That will help you to watch all those players. So I think the reason why I want to bring this up is that there's a lot of people who are willing to pay money in order for them to get the products. And yet, they will not be able to get the products because of those artificial geographical distinction that a lot of companies have been making. And this point is important in light of the whole debate about copyright issues. Because the typical response is that we need to segment a different geographical location because we want to prevent piracy. But here, people are willing to pay the money. So for example, I'm willing to pay 10 times the amount of money so that I can get all those animes from Japan that I've watched when I was a kid, but it's just not available here. And for those animes that are available here, they are dubbed incorrectly. They lose the same type of emotion from the dialogue that we can find in Japanese because you got a lot of people who are just reading the script and trying to do the dialogue. And so it's very frustrating for a lot of people. And the worst part of all is that we are willing to pay money and yet will not be able to get the product. The second thing I want to focus on is about competition. And that's actually a very big issue in a lot of countries. Australia is a good example. And so the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission actually talks about how the region code may go against the Trade Practices Act within the country. And New Zealand also is promoting the use of region-free players and also trying to prevent people from using the region code to make the price of the products more expensive. And the reason behind it is that if you're a small country, you have to decide where you're going to import the products from, whether it's the US or whether it's the EU. You don't want to have one country to be able to